The claim on the left is that the so-called gender binary is Western colonialism, and that if you go outside the Western colonial bubble, you'll find that they're all very progressive in their gender ideas. Right, and so that is why we went to Africa, because I kept hearing this.
I couldn't figure out in the trailer why he's in some African tribe. Like, what is the point of this?
We went to, well, let me just clarify. We went to Africa, number one, to troll the libs. Like, that's the number one reason we were there.
That's true missionary work, by the way. Let me just be clear.
So, and we had security meetings before this Africa trip, and they said, you know, like, you're going into Kenya, it's pretty safe, but they've got terrorists there, you could get kidnapped, and it's like, it's worth it to own the libs. I will give my life for this cause. I will. Anyway, the real reason we went there was to test this hypothesis on the left about whether or not it's true that the gender binary is a Western construct. And what we found is that, well, actually, when you get outside of the Western bubble, all there is the so-called binary, and they have never even heard of any of this stuff we're talking about in the West. And then it flipped into this really interesting thing, because we talked to the Maasai tribe in Kenya, and they live in huts that are made of cow dung, and they're semi-nomadic. They don't have electricity or anything. It's you know, they're living in the wilderness. And we're talking to them, and I'm asking them these questions about, well, can a man become a woman? You know, is it possible for a woman to have a penis? Can men give birth to babies? And they're looking at me in just utter horror and confusion. And they also assume that I believe this stuff myself. I never explained to them I didn't. Right.
That's the funniest part is that Matt's just staring at them, and they're starting to circle you.
Yeah.
Like, they're calling in reinforcements, and
then they start,
weapons start emerging.
Exactly. They all had their you know, they had certain clubs that they walked around with.
Spears. Yeah. It's like.
But then I was in this interesting position where they were wanting me. And they were all very patient. Like, they were treating me like I'm a confused child, and they said, we'll try to explain this to you. But then they wanted me to explain these ideas to them, and then it's actually very revealing when you try to explain an idea to someone who's never heard of it before. That's when you can really see if this idea makes any sense at all. Because this is someone who does not have any of the shared kind of frameworks that we do, none of the shared biases, none of that. And so you're starting at ground zero. Can I explain gender fluidity to this tribal community from ground zero? And the answer is no. It's just total nonsense. They don't even have the words. Like, I'm talking to you know, the elder in the tribe through a translator, and he doesn't have the word. I tried to get him to ask the tribal elder about non-binary people, and he says what? He doesn't have the words for that. So they literally don't have the words to even talk about these things. It's that far outside of their experience.
We'll keep chatting. I think we have a clip that I want to show from that, if our team could get it. Just a short clip, so if you guys could pull that up and tell me when it's ready. But Matt, that's so interesting, because that is, you know, a common critique. I go to Berkeley and Boulder, and you speak at all the same campuses as well, and they'll always say, no, the problem is the Western colonial framework, that if you break people back in the state of nature, and especially in tribes, is actually one they use, especially kind of the breakup of kind of colonial, or I guess colonial breakup of indigenous people in Africa, then there really is no such thing as these gender norms. And they repeat it with such kind of intensity that it almost takes you back.
And they can make these claims because they don't think anyone will be crazy enough to actually go ask any of these people these questions. And even though I did this, the rejoinder now from the left has been, well, you only talked to one primitive African tribe. And I'm like, dude, you can go talk to some more yourself. Like, go ahead, bring a camera crew, find a different tribe in Africa, and ask them all about gender fluidity. And go ahead, prove me wrong. Because this is all an insular, like you said, luxury,
belief.
Uniquely Western belief, and also very modern, that is not shared by anyone. And that includes, by the way, some of these cultures where they'll claim. Here's another one. They'll say, well, Native Americans have Two-Spirit, and they actually have added Two-Spirit to the LGBT acronym now, the ever-expanding acronym. They have numbers in it now for Two-Spirit, right? So that's what they say. They say, well, Native Americans, they have Two-Spirit, that's just like trans. All you gotta do is take 10 seconds to Google this stuff, and you discover that Two-Spirit, that term was coined, guess when? 1990 is when they came up with that. It was LGBT activists, and they make it sound like this is something that the Cheyenne were talking about.
Or the Sioux or the Iroquois.
Right. Yeah, the Apache on the Great Plains in 1801 were like running around talking about their fluid genders. No, this is LGBT activists made this up recently and now are claiming that this is some cultural belief.